understand what it is to be a subject. What it is to be a subject, according to Heidegger's reading of the tradition. And that should be maybe half the time. And then we should go on to question concerning technology, which is spells out a lot of these things, and also Heidegger changes his mind in important ways about these things. So we're ready to start talking about what Heidegger calls, following Descartes, representation. And he gives this notion, what representation usually meant to people, a kind of picture that you supposedly had in your mind of the world, or a kind of description you had, in which it was already, at the time of Descartes, like it is still in people who do artificial intelligence, who think their robot has in it a representation of the world, and on the basis of that it infers where it is and what's going on and what it should do. Descartes started that picture. And but that's not what Heidegger gets out of the notion of representation. He's got a lot more interesting view. If he did it on an exam in the philosophy department, he would fail, I think, because everybody thinks after 300 years they know what representation means, and it means something in the mind of the robot or of the people. But Heidegger takes it apart into, I guess I should have this thing to write. And what am I going to do with it?
Oh, I know. You tear off the sheet and paste the sheet on the wall.
Okay. So, in German, the representation is the word Vorstellung. And that means, literally, to place, not going to last much longer, but it'll do for the moment. Okay, maybe the other people have markers. But anyway, Vorstellen, when Heidegger reads it literally, means placing something before you. It has nothing to do with a sort of picture in the mind. And so, and that's how he reads it. That's what he says. Descartes always really had in mind, not that Descartes knew that's what he had in mind. Heidegger knows what Descartes had in mind better than Descartes, and that's why he would fail any exam that anybody would give on the subject, that he's a lot more interesting than anybody else on the subject. He thinks that there's a close connection between representation, Vorstellung, and object, which he takes apart. This is what I was saying at the end last time. Okay. Oh, I just wrote on the board object with a space between, which means to throw something in front of you. And so it's all the same idea. That is, and the idea is that the object stands over against us. And now if I could write up there, I would write the German word Gegenstand. That's in English, stands over against us. So what Heidegger's got this complicated, interesting view that when you represent something, the way these philosophers are thinking about it is, you place over against us whatever and then you how do I put it now? Let's see. You place over against us what we then determine, that is, describe, but we don't describe it as it is. We put a description on it. The whole thing is very active. We throw something in front of us, namely the world, and that object is what we then give the meaning to. You'll see what this gets clearer as we go on, but he thinks it's right in the very notion. And you can see it on 127. Let's see how it'll work. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Very good. Object. And that in German is Gegen.
he takes it apart again. And that always means something
that we place over against ourselves, and we actively impose it. And as I say, this is such an interesting idea that it takes a while to get used to it. But since we're trying to understand what it is to be an object and what it is to be a subject and how they're related, we've got to get this clear. I mean, already, and I just sort of hint ahead, I mean, the whole idea Heidegger's got is that an object is something that a subject places over against itself and gives a meaning to. It's all totally active, and it's completely different than philosophy before Descartes, which thought that we received the information from the world, we found out how it was, and so forth. That this already should sound familiar from modern science. It's a version of making the project, which we heard about, opening up a realm in which the scientist determines. I mean, research has got this in it, that it opens up this project domain, projects a ground plan as it gets translated, and only what fits into that ground plan counts as real. So you can see that already in his description of research, he's put in this notion of what it is to be an object and what it is to be a subject. The subject lays out the ground plan. The object is what gets laid out as this open field that you then study. But you only you study it according to your description of what matters or counts in it. Remember, it doesn't count as real to appeal to mystical forces, telepathy, even, as I said last time, hot and cold and tastes. All that doesn't count. In the ground plan that we lay down in research, we decide that what counts is matter in motion, and that's all that's really real. And then we proceed to study it. Well, that's how we talked about it last time, because remember he said research was the best example of the understanding of being in modernity. But now we're switching over. It's a good thing to connect up with where we were and say, well, what is this basic understanding of being, of which the ground plan in research is the best example? Well, it's got to do with the way we understand ourselves as active sources of meaning and order, and we lay that out, and we only count as real what corresponds to what we decide counts as real. And this was Galileo's great discovery, that you could just dictate that the tickle didn't count, the tickle isn't in the straw, the warmth isn't in the fire, the color isn't in the trees. All that's nothing for us to worry about. All that we care about is matter in motion, is waves and particles. Yes?
Does Heidegger believe that there can ever be a first original search upon which then we research?
I doubt it, but let's hear what you're thinking.
If the subject has to lay out the ground plan and throw a meaning over the object, it doesn't sound like anything can ever be truly discovered. It can only be redefined.
Interesting. Well, yeah, we got to make a distinction. One reason I didn't understand you is what Heidegger believes and what research believes. Because Heidegger thinks this is all wrong. Heidegger thinks the old view was right, that we really discovered things. They welled up, and we opened ourselves to them and took them into our understanding and tried to conform our understanding to the world, which had its own meaning and its own order in the cosmos. So that was, Heidegger likes that. But now that we've got research, which Heidegger thinks is the new modern way of thinking, I think it's true we never discover anything. In the extremist view, we construct an order that allows us to predict and control what's going on, but it doesn't correspond to let's see. What counts as real depends on us and what we think is important. I guess this might be a way to put it. Aristotle had his whole story about hierarchies of order and everything having an entelechy, that is a goal like plants that was unfolding and so forth, and he thought that was important, and biology was the best science because it described that mainly that was in the world, and we also had a nature, and we tried to realize our potential nature like a tree unfolding. But why was that the important thing to pay attention to? Well, that's where the research comes in. Galileo just comes in and says, well, we don't have to pay attention to that. All of that Aristotle was talking about, that's just common sense. If you really want to control things and have a science that predicts what's going to happen, all you need to do is ignore all that and pay attention to the particles and waves. Now, what I'm trying to say is, but who's to say what's real? I mean, why is it right to pay attention to the particles and waves and get prediction and control instead of, say, pay attention to the plants and the stars and the order of between the Earth, which is the center of the universe, and up to the God, which is outside the universe? Why is one more important than the other? Well, only if we decide which is important. That's the modern view. I mean, we just come along, Descartes and Galileo, and decide who cares about all that, sort of trying to find a complete order and meaning in the everyday common sense world, which is what Aristotle did brilliantly. Talked about form and matter, talked about higher and lower, talked about how the center is the universe and the earth, and matter goes down toward the center, and so forth. That made a beautiful, coherent sense of everyday understanding in the everyday world. But why should we care about that? It's up to us. And when it comes along, when Galileo and Newton say we shouldn't care about that because that won't allow us to dominate and control everything, we get a new plan which does dominate and control everything and says what Aristotle talked about wasn't really real anyway. It was just appearances. When enough waves and particles hit us, we think we're seeing trees and feeling heat and cold, and that's fine. But that's not what's real. You are all part of this modern thing. If I ask you what's really real, I suppose you're going to say particles, electrons, fields, strings maybe, and so forth. You're not going to say, well, what's really real is tickles and smells and all these nice things that happen when those particles out there hit these particles in here. Does that help any? You don't look totally happy.
Well, I think that my follow-up question would be, if we're not trying to find a unified, complete order that governs all of reality, isn't the perfect science just going to make a life-size map of the world instead of guide you to anything? It's just a world that...
That's right. That's right. And I think I can say what you're saying. It changes the subject, so to speak. In Aristotle, it looked like there was some kind of moral guidance in the universe, and some higher and lower, in the hierarchies of the order of things. And you're going to give all that up. And why would you give all that up with Galileo and Newton? Well, because suppose all you really want is domination, control, prediction. That's power. That's what really matters. So what happened was the West gave up meaning and moral order in the cosmos, and the idea that we are integrated into the it's important. The universe is this thing we got. They had a cosmos. A cosmos was ordered in terms of values values Heidegger was like, in terms of what was important to human beings, and where their place was in it, and you were supposed to fit into the natural order, which is full of meaning. That a universe is sort of different. A universe doesn't say there's any natural order. It just says it's all one unified something or other. And what unified something or other? Well, fields and particles. And hopefully everybody's so unhappy because they can't get, the unified theory. Einstein tried all his life. Now the swing people are trying. We won't be happy until we've really got a universe, a single stuff, when its activity, which is going to explain and predict and allow us to control everything, but it won't have any meaning at all. That's what we're saying. And why would anybody want that rather than meaning? Well, only because at some point we switched our understanding of being into wanting to dominate and control everything. And that's just something that never occurred to Aristotle or Plato or anybody before Galileo to do. Okay, that was a helpful question. This is really exciting, deep things, but it's so strange that it takes a while. And when you're puzzled, just ask me. I puzzled about. Yeah, go ahead.
I think implicit in that understanding of the universe is our current state of religion that Heidegger talks about in the modern religion.
Ah, very good.
But I feel like that's in there that means sort of like thinking our meaning we make it religion, but the meaning of religion.
Remember his phrase? It fits perfectly. I would have said it if I thought of it. I mean, because if you take away all the meaning from the cosmos and just level it into a bunch of forces banging up against each other, where will you put religion? Well, remember, it becomes religious experience. It goes along with pickles and smells and colors and all the stuff that we've got just inside us as, I don't even want to say as subjects, because subjects turn out to be what we really are, and that's quite different. That's just, all I can say is we just call it inner experience. And there's going to be religious experience, remember, he says aesthetic experience, things that once had some kind of an authority and meaning outside of us turn into experience. And everything does. I mean, I was trying to think of more examples. I think sexual experience, I mean, that could have been something, it is in most cultures, something meaningful that connects us with the cosmos in some way. But then it gets to be just experience, which you can sort of control and enhance and so forth. And there are probably a lot of other examples, I bet, but I just haven't thought of any, where something that once was important and meaningful turns into experience. So, and that doesn't require a subject, right? Doesn't require a subject, because subject, jumping, well, do I really want to get way ahead? Okay, anyway, well, a subject, obviously, is that which makes this change and decides what counts as real and imposes the ground plan. So the subject doesn't really have anything to do with so-called subjectivity, which would be your feelings and your religious and sexual and aesthetic and whatever else feelings. So that's why I just called it something inner. Feelings aren't really very important, but being a subject in this new Cartesian sense, which we're going to get to, is the super important thing. We are the orderers and controllers of everything that matters and decides what matters. I wonder if I could flip to something I was going to read later, which is the perfect expression of what I've just been saying. I think, is it in the Age of the World picture? I don't even know whether it's in the Age of the World picture or the question concerning technology. I think it's in the Age of the World picture. Yeah, there it is, on 131. It fits in perfectly with all we've been saying and with his talking about modern representation. In distinction from Greek apprehending, that would be this just openness to the world and let things show up for you with their own meaning. Modern representing, whose meaning the word representio first brings to its earliest expression, intends something quite different. Here to represent, or Helen, means to bring what is present at hand, that just means the stuff out there, before oneself, as something standing over against us, to relate it to oneself, to the one representing it, and now this is the crucial thing, and to force it back into this relationship to oneself as the normative realm. That means, and we're going to decide what normative means valuable, or what it means, what worthiness. And we're going to decide what counts as real, what counts as worth paying attention to. Then man gets into the picture. Remember I said last time, that doesn't mean there's a picture and you're now standing in it. That means makes it be a picture. And man takes precedence over whatever is. That is, says what counts as real. And let me keep going. And therewith, man, skipping a little, sets himself up as the setting in which whatever is must henceforth set itself forth, must present itself. That is, things have to show up on our terms, in terms of what's important, what we're going to decide is important. Okay. And why? Well, on page, I'm just skipping to fill in what I've been saying. What do you get from that? Well, it's clear in the next paragraph. I'll just read some more, starting in the second sentence. What is decisive is that man, by the way, man here is the same as subject. Man's become a subject now. Man is man comes in at the stage of modernity. I guess people talked about human beings before that, but Kant introduces this special notion of man, and which is of course man and woman too, but it's this new definition of us as subjects. You could have said subjects here. I think, just to connect. What is decisive is that the subject itself expressly takes up this position as one constituted by itself, and that it, I'm just going to switch it all to subject, intentionally maintains it as taken up by itself, and that it makes it secure as the solid footing for the possible development of humanity. Now skipping a little, and then skipping two sentences. There, yeah.
So when he says intentionality, is this consciousness, is it reflective?
Intentionality. Where is intentionality? Oh, let's see. That he intentionally. No. It doesn't say intentionality. That he intentionally. Intentionality is a very technical term in philosophy, and that's what Delane is thinking about. But here it's just the most common thing. That is, that he, on purpose, knowing full well what he's doing, this is what Kant thinks is so important. Knowing full well what he's doing, the subject sets itself up as the decider of what's meaningful, what's important, and so forth. He takes a stand with relation to whatever is, and there begins that way of being human, which mans the realm of human capability as a domain given over to measuring and executing for the purpose of, and this is why I wanted to read it, gaining mastery over that which is as a whole. See, that's what I was saying to you. That's the payoff. But if you don't want mastery, then you don't want all of this. But you do. That modern man wants mastery. That's been the story since 16-something. Yeah.
It seems like there's a strong claim in these couple paragraphs that there's volition of this decision that man or subject knows that it's sort of viewing itself in that context.
Oh, that's wonderful what you're saying. Oh, this is all so good.
We take ourselves as thrown open or thrown into the world.
Yeah. But
we didn't decide to necessarily be there.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I wish I could just open to the page where that is. I have no idea, but I know that Heidegger thinks that this, you put your finger right on the sort of paradox of this whole thing. That we were thrown, as you put it, into this modern way of looking at things. We didn't decide to be subjects. It was the understanding of being that made us all of a sudden, pretty quickly, I mean it only took 100 years, switch around and have this whole different view of who we are and what the cosmos is that we now have. And the peculiar thing, and Heidegger thinks it's absolutely crucial, the one thing this way of looking at things can't understand is how come we suddenly were put into this way of looking at things, which now seems absolutely obvious and so pervasive like the water to the fish. We got a new understanding of being. Where did we get it? Well, Heidegger doesn't think Heidegger says in funny ways that it was sent, but he doesn't think there was any God or anything doing the sending. He just means that within 100 years, everything got changed. Not just things in the foreground, but the whole background, again, I could say style, if that helps, or understanding of being. I'll give you a new term for it in a minute. Got switched. And we didn't do it. We received it. But the whole of what we received is an understanding which doesn't enable us to understand what happened. That's what they're saying.
Also for the peasants, as you went back to the process that you read.
No, the peasants probably are outside it. Let's think about that. But let me just repeat this because it's so important to Heidegger. You understand this, Flip? That we should understand the world as objects and ourselves as subjects somewhere between 1600 when Galileo started it and something like 1638 when Descartes pretty well put it clearly, that all happened isn't something anybody could decide or control or even fully understand, and it's just exactly against the very picture that people were forming, that they were the orderers of everything, that because they were not, that something or other ordered them to think they were the orderers of everything. And of course, in a certain way, they are the orderers of everything once they think it. But they didn't choose it. Okay, that's very important. That's the deep Heideggerian sense that there's something wrong with this whole modern ontology. It can't account for what it is. That's pretty serious. And now, the peasants, that's interesting. Let's think about the peasants. If anybody is outside of this whole modern Cartesian picture, it's these peasants in Heidegger's picture anyway, and probably true, who've just been living in the same sort of houses, plowing their fields in the same sort of way, being at the mercy of the seasons and knowing that it isn't up to them when they come and when they go, or that there are seasons. They have this feeling of nature sort of welling up and overwhelming them, and all they can do is nurture it. They're in the poesis understanding. I think the peasants are sort of out of it in a good way. And Heidegger can see this partly because he's a peasant. And I told you, he didn't want to go to Berlin when they offered him the chance to the most important, prestigious chair in the best university in Germany, in the best city in Germany. And he said, no, I'm going to stick with the peasants. They know something none of you guys know. Have you ever read this stuff before? You're so in tune with it. It's just amazing. You read it a little bit before? Okay, good. You took 185? You took my course. Aha. That's cheating. That's good. No, it isn't really, because this never shows up in my course. You know, you've just extrapolated it. It took Heidegger, I don't know, something like 20 years to get to this point. He didn't see, in the book that made him famous, Being in Time, he was still doing philosophy in a new, deeper, better way. But what he didn't see was that there was a history of understandings of being. He thought there was just one in the West, and we had it, and we lost a lot of it, and so forth. And then he got this idea, this Kehre, as he puts it, this reversal. He got really turned around, and he thought, what am I doing trying to find the universal, ahistorical structure of human being? There is such a thing, and he got it in Being in Time, and it's the best book of the 20th century, that he thought, that's not what's important. What's important is to understand how we became the kind of human beings that we are now in the West, with all our problems of nihilism and technology, and to thereby, from then on, he studies the history of being. And that's what I never said. You just made it up, and rightly. Okay, yeah.
How does this relate to the idea of the Enlightenment and man sort of maturing?
Maturing, yes. Well, that's in here. I did talk last time about Kant and his essay on the Enlightenment, didn't I? Yeah. Okay. What is it to be mature? Well, from Kant's point of view, to be mature is to take over the meaning of your life and the meaning of the universe and impose on it your own order, which you make up out of your capacities as a rational being, and which you take full responsibility for. So it's just another version. To be mature is to be a subject, where a subject means the self-responsible orderer of everything, and including your own desires, your own body, everything in Kant you have to take over and impose your order on. Kant is a sort of halfway to the Nietzsche, because Kant thinks that we're all going to impose the same order on our desires and on our body and on the universe, because there's still something universal called reason. I smuggled it in when I said we were all reasonable beings. But then when time you get to Nietzsche's just seen that being reasonable is just one more thing which we invent and impose on ourselves, that all what we really are is beings who are capable of inventing new orders of meaning and imposing them on themselves and everybody else. That's what it is to be a human being. That's a constant world disclosure for Nietzsche, and value projector. Remember how Heidegger says that, I found that Nobody Dies for Values. Did you, when you were reading it, that I was looking for last time? We'll see. But anyway, from Nietzsche's point of view, people impose values. Nobody should die for values, because that would suggest that they had lost control of their lives, so to speak. Everybody should be responsible only to their own decisions as to what's real and what matters. But that's where it's heading. And then Heidegger sees all this, partly because he's teaching Nietzsche courses over and over, because he's got this intuition that Nietzsche is the culmination of the West, and if he could really understand Nietzsche, he'd understand where we were at, and he'd understand technology and subjects and objects and everything, and he did. He's standing on Nietzsche's shoulders, and he knows it. Okay. Well, keep interrupting and saying things. I won't have my lecture, but I'll have something much more interesting going on here. Let's see. So we did 127. Where did I stop talking about? What? 132. Did I already get to 132? Okay, yeah, good, thanks. So here we are on 132. Did I read the one? Yeah, I read on 132. But there's more. I read the top part, and I read the middle part. Everything on 132 is important. In the last paragraph, the last full paragraph, 3 lines down, he says, we must track out and expose the original naming power of the worn-out world and concept to represent. See, what he's trying to say is, never mind what you think Descartes thought and what Descartes might have thought. That's not what we want to find out anymore. We want to get back to the meaning of the forestelling. I guess I should write up there so that... What did I do with it? Smart. You see it? Not this. Is this it? Is this the good one? It is the good one? I don't know. Let's try it. Yeah. That's a nightmare, this kind of thing for this one. I can't master it. Okay, so anyway, so we're talking about this word representation, which he's now going to give us a whole new meaning. He says it means to set before oneself and to set forth in relation to oneself. Through this, whatever it is comes to a stand as an object. That is, so I impose this order, and I get this way the world is as a picture for me, that is standing over there. And in that way receives the seal of being. That the world becomes a picture is one and the same event with the event of man becoming subjectum in the midst of that which is. We are the ones that put this order on everything. So now I know where we are. Let me see where we are. And on 134, well, all the stuff I've been saying, I hope you see where it is in the book, but just in case you don't, I will it helps with reading Heidegger for me to say it and then read it so you can decode Heidegger. So the bottom paragraph on 134, the fundamental event of the modern age is the conquest of the world as picture. The word picture now means the structured image that is the creature of man's producing, which represents and sets before. Now this sentence is helpful. In such producing, man contends for the position in which he can be that particular being who gives the measure and draws up the guidelines for everything that is. That's what I've been saying. He decides what counts as real, what counts as important. And that's the sense of that, and in a way, of course, puts himself in the place of God, people say sometimes with Descartes. I mean, once the subject does the job that God used to do, of giving things meaning, of giving things value, of giving them an order, of deciding of what's real, creating what's real, all this now turns out to be, amazingly enough, something we do, according to this world, this switch of worlds. And that's the modern world, and that's maturity. Yeah. I don't know. I'd like to see the German. I presume that means man struggles to get and assure himself of that position. I mean, it takes a while. From Descartes to Kant to Nietzsche. It didn't happen right away. What do you think? I mean, it isn't as if there's somebody else that's trying to do something else and we're...
I mean, I really like to know because it's implied, but what if the man implies there are other actors?
Yeah, I think that's not it. Anybody got the German? No, that's unlikely, and I didn't bring it along. I mean, can somebody make a note for us or to look it up in the German? Is that right? And if it means anything interesting, I'll report on it. I think it just means struggles to get that new position clear and solidified. It took from 1630 to, that's Descartes' discourse, 1638 to be exact, was the Descartes' Meditations, where he lays out subjects and objects, and it didn't get clear until Nietzsche, which is late 18-something.
And the world resisted.
What?
The world resisted.
The world resisted. Horace has got an interesting answer to you. The world resisted.
And it resisted because you're imposing on it what it is not.
Well, that's sure, but I didn't know that it resisted. How did it resist? Can you tell us more?
Oh, in the sense that you are continuously needing to take nature by force, as in Francis Bacon. It resists you. It resists revealing its secrets. Showing us what it is, and so we have to contend with it, but we will master it.
I see, yes. But what you said were two things which I want to distinguish. It doesn't resist it's not important that it resists in a kind of forceful way, because we'll outforce it. We'll make bombs, with atom bombs out of these atoms. Right. But it resists in another way that I think this is what you're onto, man has to struggle to show that to reveal that what's really going on is what we say is going on, that it's only particles and that none of the stuff that Aristotle talked about made any sense. It took a while to convince everybody of that. Because it certainly looks like there are trees out there that have a growth out of their own stuff. It looks like sunflowers turn toward the sun, and you have to discover that they don't really seek the sun, that the sun makes one side of them grow faster than the other, and that makes them turn. So everything that looks like it had a mind of its own in nature and was heading for something has to be shown to be a machine. Remember, animals look like they're hurt. It's a struggle to get them to recognize that they're just reflex machines that make ouch noises when you hurt them, when you seem to hurt them. So, yeah, and I think that's what you're talking about. So we make nature resists. The dogs certainly resist being treated like machines, and that's we have to do it anyway. Because then when we do it, we show, look at that, you can keep all about the machine. We do it all along. You were saying something?
Yeah, I was asking you about contend. And it seems to me less of contending to against someone else with other actors, or even just to show that you have this kind of ability, but more that there's an internal struggle changing
your own nature.
Your understanding of nature.
Well, that's interesting. I don't know. I'm going to go read that sentence. I mean, all of this could be right. Whatever that sentence means, all the things you're saying is true. You have to resist the way nature seems to be the way Aristotle says it was, and overcome your tendency to think that way, and show that it's all really matter in motion. And yourself too. You look like you've got a sort of potential to develop, and it looks like there really is religion, and there really is a mystical union with the cosmos and stuff, and you have to gradually clear that up in yourself. Getting another nice way to put it, that Ken would just had reminded me with maturity, becoming mature isn't something you can do overnight. I mean, that's it. The struggle to become mature took, I'm just trying to calculate, from the middle of the 1600s to the end of the middle of the 1600s to the end of the 1800s. It took 150 years to become mature, and everybody become Nietzscheans. Yes.
Another way of putting it is overcoming superstition.
That's another way it's founded to Descartes and the scientists and so forth. Right? Superstition isn't something you can get over easily about the cosmos and about you.
Yeah, that you're the creature of God.
That's right.
That would be a competing worldview.
There's always this other worldview. You mean this other understanding of being, which you finally get rid of if you're modern. Of course, and that will have interesting, important consequences. Did I see another hand? Yeah.
Isn't also a possibility that the thing with which we contend is our own struggle against meaninglessness, where we can hear, Kierkegaard talking over the shoulder of Heidegger here, saying, with the problem that if things have meaning in virtue of the fact that we've given them meaning, they're not actually meaningful at all. And we have to struggle to find a worldview that satisfies us, and we find that in this method it's impossible.
Let me think about that. that's too complicated. but it's because I would have most of these people. How many of them know Kierkegaard? How many have been in philosophy 7 is what it amounts to, because nobody else teaches Kierkegaard. Too few. Come to see me in the office hours to talk about him. He plays a very interesting role in all this. But okay, let's go on. Let's see. So we've got 5 characteristics of what it is to be a picture that Heidegger wants to get now. That is, this whole business now, we're getting to get this picture. So let's go through it. Because these are all characteristics of modernity that sort of were already illustrated in research, but now he's generalized them. So to get the whole picture, a picture is fixed and complete. Everything is sort of up front in a picture. There's nothing hidden, nothing mysterious. And so to get the picture is another way of saying you objectify everything, fix it in its entirety. This is subtle things that Heidegger's trying to tease out here. On page 129, he says, about 15 lines from the bottom, to get the picture throbs with being acquainted with something, with being equipped and prepared for it, where the world becomes picture in its entirety. What is in its entirety, that's what I think you should underline, is juxtaposed as that for which man is prepared, and so forth and so forth. What I want to say is there's something total about this, something new. The old views didn't try to explain everything. Remember I said there were always witches and mysteries and monsters and parapsychological phenomena and ghosts. And, I mean, in Shakespeare, for instance, think how much weird stuff there is in the cosmos. And but when you get it all clear in its entirety, then that's a different thing. And you get not, I think, totalizing. That's going to come later. I think that's postmodern. You just get the whole fixed picture. And it's called, at the bottom of 137, total mobilization in the appendix. I got a little digression here. That somewhere I have to say that Heidegger believed in Nazi. He was a Nazi. This is awfully upsetting. I don't know whether it comes as a shock to any of you. It sure came as a shock to me. But from 1933, when Hitler came into power, until 1938, roughly, when he wrote this, and didn't publish these footnotes because he would have been dead. But he believed that the Nazis were the answer to technology and nihilism. And then he realized, no, they were the extremist form of technology and nihilism, and he flipped around. But here he's criticizing a German slogan. The total mobilization of everything isn't something that you gradually get. It's what you're supposed to, achieve. Every detail of the culture is supposed to be mobilized to do what Hitler decides to do. And that's a sign that Heidegger's flipped around, that he thinks now total mobilization is a bad thing. Wait a minute, so, yeah, go ahead.
So, why you said the distinction between entirety versus totalization?
Yeah, what I want to say is that, and I'm not sure this is right, but I think that modern and having a picture is meaning that you've already got, or that you've got the ability to get the whole thing in a fixed, explicit way, an understanding of reality and an organization of your society, in the case of the Nazis, where every detail is already in place. Whereas what totalization, as I'm understanding it, would be, is you're constantly reinterpreting, finding new stuff. You never get to the point where you've got the picture. I'm not sure this is right. Do you think that's right? I don't know. But getting the picture, I think the way he's doing it here, where he's certainly doing...
so you're saying one entirety is fixed and totalizing is not necessarily fixed?
That's right. I would have thought that totalizing... what did I write down?
Yeah, the issue is flexibility.
That's right.
You don't have the flexibility in this.
In the picture, that's right. That's right. It's there, it's settled, it's done, every detail is in, and you can pay attention to some details rather than others, but it's already all done. I think that's something like the stable, explicit picture. And that's going to be modernity. And then he's going to go flip over to the fact that you never can get the whole picture, and you constantly even can change the whole picture, and that's going to be postmodern. Okay, so that's what I think is going on. And that's why he thinks total mobilization is not like totalizing. It's a picture I wrote here, complete and static. You can't talk about how the picture expands to take in more and more. The picture just is there. Okay. And now also, and another way to see the picture story that he's interested in is that everything is fitted together in a system. That's right before what I read at 129. We get the picture concerning something doesn't mean only that what is set before us, is represented to us in general, but that what stands before us and all that belongs to it and all that stands together in it as a system. That means that all the details fit into place. It's not just a heap, this picture. A picture is an organized something or other, which every detail is already in place, and it all hangs together. I was constantly looking back at Taylor, thinking, gee, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? You remember that on page, it's Roman numeral 4, right at the beginning. And Taylor just assumes that it's all a question of system. Where is this? Okay, in 4 at the top of Taylor's book. In the past, man has been first. In the future, the system must come first. And that's exactly what Heidegger's saying. The system comes first when you get to modernity. The first object of any good system must be that of development. Never mind. No, and then he goes into his version of what the system is. But that there has to be a system is important. And pictures, I think, are, for Heidegger, flat. By that I mean that there's no distinction of better and worse, of rank, of worthiness in this, the way he pictures the picture. And that's got to do with values on 142. That's where I found the phrase I was looking for. At the top, the representation of value is just as essential to the modern interpretation of that which is, as is the system, where anything that is has become the object of representing. It first incurs, in a certain manner, a loss of being. That means, sort of again, its worthiness, its importance, it's where it fits into the cosmos. All that is gone. Everything is just leveled into the stuff, the real stuff that science, that research tells us about, but even more generally, that's all there is. Yeah.
So, when a person has values and they value certain things over other things, is that just a throwback to this old understanding? No, but a good question. It could be. I mean, but the way Heidegger's using values, he's getting it from Nietzsche. And I mentioned it last time just in passing. Nietzsche says we posit the values. That is, it's up to you to decide what's valuable. So that you decide. There aren't any values there. We're all part of this. I mean, you can easily get into this subjectivist frame of mind that what's valuable is up to you to say. I mean, that's maturity. I mean, you don't just take the values that your family gives you, or your church gives you, or your state gives you, or your culture gives you. You have to decide what you value. And then, of course, I don't know. But anyway, then Heidegger thinks, of course, I can't tell you keep saying that because it seems so obvious to me, then these values don't mean anything anymore. If they don't have any authority over you, if you aren't trying to find out what they are and attune yourself to them, if it's just up to you to decide what counts as values, then you could just decide on something else. And that's why he says this phrase I was looking for in 142, value, about a little below the middle, value is the impotent and threadbare disguise of the objectivity of whatever is, an objectivity that has become flat and devoid of background. No one dies from your values. You die for what? Commitments, concerns, things, there are other names for what people die for. They don't die for values, if values means these kind of
posited, that is, what we decide. They find something that comes and grabs them. That's the crucial thing. I mean, if it grabs you, like work of art, or falling in love, or being a religious fanatic ready to die for your religion or whatever, then it really has power. But if it doesn't grab you, if you choose it, then it doesn't have any power at all, because it's just really just you, and you can just drop it. It doesn't have any grip on you. That's what he's saying. Yeah.
But when you say, Heidegger says there are values that you don't define, people do describe it, but the ones that would grab you have work.
No, I misspoke. I meant no values grab you, the way we're defining it. That there are other things that grab you, as I say, commitments, concerns. I wish I had a nice word for what grabs you. Tillich, a theologian, talks about ultimate concern. I talk about unconditional commitment, but I like ultimate concern better for this, because even unconditional commitment sounds like something you do, whereas what we want is for a word for what grabs you, and no values grab you, by the way we're defining them. All values are what you choose. If there is something that grabs you, we're going to have another word for it. I've been saying something that has authority for you. You're looking worried. Go ahead.
Modern view, if we are defining this whole picture, right, and we are that they will this is worthwhile and that is not worthwhile, and we are talking about that value, how could it be the case that just giving it another label, like this is actually all this thing about me, I didn't label it. How could we differentiate?
Okay. Gee, that's good. It isn't just
nothing should grab you that way. That's irrational.
Yes, good. Nothing should grab you that way. But also, let's see, I think of keep what you're saying in mind when I try to keep what I'm saying in mind. Say what you said again.
How one as a person differentiates between values that he's created and things that grab you, whether or not we label them values. And I think if you said that, nothing should grab you.
That's right. Nothing should grab you. I was going to say, now I remember, the same thing from another angle. You can describe two kinds of experience. The kind of experience that you feel you're in control and you decided what was valuable. And then there are these experiences of things grabbing you, and they feel very different, like falling in love or deciding that you would devote your life to being a ballet dancer or something. And then Horace comes in and says, right, but you should be suspicious of these things. They just show you're not mature yet, that you're out of control. They're just inner stuff, and you've got to get rid of that kind of inner stuff.
That's what I'm saying. It's like you have to have those experiences. You can't recognize those experiences as valid.
That's it. You still have them, but you can't recognize them as valid. That's exactly it. And that's perfect. Yeah. Passions, yes. And passions could once have been a good thing. Kierkegaard talks about infinite passion, by which he means being sort of swept away by falling in love, for instance. But now passion has come to mean sort of being out of control and sort of the victim of something, which if you had more character, you could get under the master. Yeah.
Doesn't Sartre say that the unavoidable thing is other people, and that's what always grabs us?
Well, again, no Sartre. I mean, that's not fair. Okay, yeah.
It's likely that these notions of size and passion are quite gendered, in the sense that being like masculinity and our idea of masculinity sort of legitimizes this, rational or non-emotional, and sort of being childish and defense in what our context of movies often get put in as passionate and irrational and sort of like children.
That's right. That's it. Kant was all for being a man in that sense, and thought of women as immature and childlike. That's the whole long time that went on. I mean, Nietzsche's one of the most interesting because he thinks women as sort of immature and childlike, but he doesn't think that it has to do with there being women. It's just the way the culture has constituted them. And he says this wonderful thing: it may take 300 years before they become as free spirits in control of themselves in the world as men are. That there's nothing intrinsic, and Nietzsche's wonderful, nothing intrinsic about anything in Nietzsche. But he still thinks that women in his time were, and of course they made the women childlike and immature because they projected that on them and so forth. Yeah, the way the modernity goes, sooner or later, everybody will be mature and in total control of their passions and in total control of their lives, if this story works. Yeah. Should I go back to this?
One of the other things where it's interesting during this period to see people like Pope, and the poetry of this period, it was called metaphysical poetry. It was very, no passion, very rational.
Right. There was.
Even
yeah, everything was trying to be rational. And because you wanted to be, Kant had great terminology for this. He was Kant, together Descartes and Kant just sort of, they didn't really make this up, but they articulated the new understanding of being that was moving in on people. I mean, it was moving in on people who didn't, like Luther, who said that every man was a pope and had a direct relation to God, and Gutenberg, who printed the Bible in German, whereas up to then it was only in Latin. So things were happening all over. But Kant, for first Descartes and then Kant, really got it and expressed it. And now what was I going to say about it? Oh yeah, Kant says that insofar as you've got emotions and passions and all that, you are heteronomously determined. That means something outside of you makes you do what you do. And the ideal that everybody has to have in maturity consists on being autonomous. That's the big Kantian slogan. Instead of being heteronomously determined by something outside of you, you're self-determined. That's what autonomous means. You decide which of your feelings matter and what to do about them and everything. And that's such a powerful picture that we're all in it still. Although, to the extent that we're postmodern, we're not in it anymore. I mean, Heidegger sort of helped flip it over into something else. Okay, so what are we doing? Should we take a break or just keep going? And what do you think, Ken? Everybody all right? So just, well, because I've only got the first 2 lines of my lecture into this so far. Or maybe the first page. So we got everything into being a system. That's what I got. And leveling all ranks. That's what I was. And that leads us back to what I've already read, is to gain control of everything. I mean, that just fits what I just said. When you're mature, you are autonomous, and that's another way of saying you gain control of yourself, and the modern subject gains control of everything, puts everything at our disposal. And in the middle of 133, the world stands at man's disposal as conquered, and the more objectively the object appears, all the more subjectively, that is, more importunately, does the subject rise up. And now that's the transition I want to make to this talk about subjects. Being an object is obviously correlative of being a subject, and we've gotten sort of ahead of the story in a sense because I've already been talking about what it is to be a subject. I'm not sure whether I need to talk more about it or not. But let's see where we head. I mean, my next story is to talk about, well, what is it to be the modern subject? And Heidegger starts talking about it on 128 and points out that subject didn't mean anything like what we've been describing. For Aristotle, the word comes from subjectum, and the subjectum is just whatever it is that underlies what's going on. This is on the middle of 128. He's telling us that the Greek hypokimenon, which is what gets translated as subjectum, is that which lies before, or beneath really, as ground, gathers everything into itself. And that has no special relation to man at all. And that's, I mean, the subject would be this lectern, and it underlies the brownness and the hardness and so forth. I mean, it's a very interesting fact in the history of philosophy that Aristotle meant, when he thought of subjects, thought of the things like this, and Descartes just switched it around and took it over, because if subject means that which underlies, well, if the lectern underlies the color, what underlies everything? The meaning of everything? Well, us. And so we're the real subjects. That's what happens when it gets flipped around. And so now it means, starting with Descartes, the underlying all intelligibility. Now let's see if I think we said so much of this already. Yeah, we said that. Let's see. Well, he keeps saying it again and again, but here's one I haven't read at the bottom of 134, about 15 lines up. Well, maybe you know that's the one with contends. Man contends for the position in which he can be the particular being who gives the measure and draws up the guidelines for everything that is. Did I read that already? That's what I thought. So I may have, which is fine. I have something else to say. So once we make sure that I've caught up with myself. Yeah, Ken.
I just want to correct what you said on 133 in the middle. You said, the more effectively the object appears, all the more subjectively, the more incorporative.
I can't pronounce that either.
Yeah. Does the subjectum rise up?
Yes.
I don't understand.
Okay, that's a funny way of putting it, but what it's really saying is, just as, insofar as everything turns into objects, correlative with that, we turn into subjects. That's all. So, things don't get objectified immediately. It takes work. And we don't get to be subjects immediately. It takes work. That's this maturity business, and that's all. And they pull each other up to their full height together.
Kind of a more relationship. The more things are subjects, the more things are objects, the more we're. That's
right. That's exactly how to put it. So now we've said everything that we need to say. Did I ever read this? Probably not. Right after the talk about what substance means for Aristotle on 128, he then comes around to what now subject means. Man becomes that being upon which all it is grounded as regards the manner of its being and its truth. Man becomes the relational center of that which is as such, and so forth. And that means that's there, he thinks, and that's the essence of the modern age, he puts it. And everything gets organized to satisfy our interests. That's more clear in the notes at the end. I'll just read you one quote really, which is this is sort of mind-boggling, but I think you've gotten used to it enough, and you wouldn't have to believe this. You could just bracket this. But subjects don't really mean people like you or me. Nations can be subjects. Whatever it is that is the source of giving meaning to everything and defining what matters. So it could be the working class, for instance, as the subject. So he goes through this here, which is a funny move. It shows how the notion of subject has gotten to be of this special notion of whatever it is that is the center and gives meaning to everything, and it needn't be individual people. So the second sentence in the full paragraph, man has become subjective. Therefore he can determine and realize the essence of subjectivity, always in keeping with the way in which he himself conceives and wills himself. Man, as rational being in the age of the Enlightenment, that's Kant, is no less subject than the man who grasps himself as a nation, wills himself as a people, fosters himself as a race, and empowers himself as Lord of the earth. I mean, that's a funny collection of things, but the most clear is that if you know Marx, where he says the working class is the subject of history, that means that everything that happens in human history gets understood by the way the working class understands itself and its role. And that's just interesting, that you can generalize the notion of subject. You don't have to worry about it. And you will get, finally, and this is more of the things that he's got in these footnotes at the bottom of 152, and now we're going to talk about what's the result of all this? Well, of the world picturing. Well, it's that everything gets technologically organized. In the planetary imperialism of technologically organized man, the subjectivism of man attains its acme, from which point it will descend in the level of organized uniformity and there firmly establish itself. This uniformity becomes the surest instruments of total technological rule over the earth. So that's his grim picture of modernity in Age of the World picture. I don't have more to say about it, but you guys have had a lot to say about it. If you want to say anything more about it, this is the time. But you have sort of jumped ahead and covered everything, I think, about the world picture. So I was going to talk the rest of the time about question concerning technology, because you should be reading it, and I want to give you sort of guidelines to help you read it. So let's go now to the essay, The Question Concerning Technology. The first essay.
Do you want to touch on the gigantic at all here?
Well, didn't you see my email? I won't talk about the gigantic until you tell me what the truth behind the claims about what happened to Taylor that we were discussing.
Oh, I just said okay.
Okay. No, okay. I think it's important to not be mysterious. I mean, Ken got this fascinating email, it seems to me, which I think we should, Xerox it and distribute it. It looks like Taylorism is alive and kicking someplace, and the labor unions are still fighting it. And they're asking us, in effect, to tell them where Taylorism stands. And we have to find somebody who knows, because what I was going to say, well, I'm not going to say it yet. I don't know what to say right now. We got to find somebody who knows about what really became of Taylorism. And they got to come and give us a visiting lecture. You didn't get that email, right?
No, that came after I left.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you. Someone was just searching the web and found this course description and asked some questions about the size of Taylorism that they were responding to.
A union action against. I think it seems to be a college that wants to make all the cleaning people, that Taylorize all the cleaning people. And this letter is asking, it's fascinating, does it really make them more efficient? Does it get rid of absenteeism? Does it keep them from getting strained and hurt? And how much money does it save? And just exactly amazing. And I said to Ken, we had to answer him and tell him, and he said we have to find out sort of what it is. And for this course we should, somehow. Okay. So,
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
One more second. The last endnote for the Age of the World picture.
Okay.
He just makes one comment I thought was interesting. I'm not sure if it's email, but curious. He said the American interpretation, talking about Americanism.
Oh, I think this is the quote you wanted me to talk about. Okay.
The American interpretation of Americanism by means of pragmatism still remains outside the metaphysical realm. I don't get that.
He thinks
Talking about American pragmatism?
Yeah. For him, American pragmatism is sort of a very low-level kind of pragmatism, like William James. Just whatever works is what is real, or something like that. He thinks that's sort of pathetic compared to this deep understanding of pictures and subjects and objects and totalizing and rigidity and all that. It's just a trivial observation that from his point of view, and it's certainly, and maybe a deep one about Americans, that they really admire everything that works. But Heidegger says if you want to understand the understanding of being, you've got to do better than that.
Why is that outside the metaphysical realm?
That because it's not deep, because it hasn't got James has not got an understanding of the understanding of being when he says that in what's real is what works. It's just, I don't know, something like practical observation or something. Before you could have a really metaphysical claim, you'd have to say that this is what's real, and only this. And James, I don't think, goes so far. I don't even know how you could say this is what's real, what works. If you could, then it would be metaphysical. But anyway, that's what Heidegger's worrying about. He thinks that it's just too superficial, and though it's probably right about America, it's not helpful in philosophy. Of course, Nietzsche's a kind of pragmatist, and Heidegger knows that, and Nietzsche's a deep kind of pragmatist, Heidegger thinks. because Nietzsche thinks that everything is a struggle for the control of everything, and everybody or every group is trying, or whatever subject, individual groups, nations are all trying to impose their understanding of reality on the other ones. Now that's getting to be real metaphysical pragmatism, I think Heidegger would say. And this is closely related to talk about the gigantic, but I don't want to talk about the gigantic right now. Okay, so I want to talk for the last half hour about questions concerning technology. Are you all still there? 2 hours is a long time. Okay, well, let's try. Anybody ready to go on? Okay, I'm ready to go on. So here we are, a question concerning technology, which is, I just want to note that it's in order to get you to have a free relation to technology that you're supposed to understand that. It's important to realize that Heidegger's not a Luddite. He doesn't want to say we should destroy technology. The technology is an awful thing. He's clear that he doesn't on 4. But people don't realize this. I think you do, but I think I'd better just say it, because you'll read some books who say, boy, Heidegger, he's just a peasant. He doesn't like technology. He wants to get rid of technology. He doesn't much like it. I mean, there are lots of things he doesn't like anyway. But he liked television. He used to always go over to his brother's house to watch soccer games on television. And he certainly used, pens, and he didn't like typewriters. He wrote everything out in longhand, and then he had his brother type it. That he didn't object to his brother typing it. But anyway, Heidegger wasn't a big fan of technology, but that's not the point. He didn't think that we should go back to a primitive world in which we got rid of technology. He thought that we should understand it and its place and its limits and its dangers and how it's, I'll just say this again, blurting this out, the danger is that if we only had a technological understanding of everything and nothing else, we'd be in trouble. And he thinks that technology has, more than any other understanding of being, a way of trying to become total. And that's the totalizing. And that's dangerous. But I'm jumping way ahead. Right now on page 4, he's telling us that he doesn't want to talk about technology, but the essence of technology. And that the essence of technology isn't anything technological. We have to understand that. What does that mean? Well, you're used to that, I should think, that the essence of technology is the technological understanding of being. It's a certain way of looking at everything so as to, for instance, dominate it and control it and stabilize it. That's what it was in the Age of the World picture. Now he's thinking maybe technology isn't quite like that, that he hasn't, I'm not going to tell you what he thinks it is yet, but that's the essence of technology. So we need another name for it. And he talks about the technological understanding of being. I think the good word for that would be technicity. We just need some other word so that you can distinguish the gadgets from a certain understanding of the way of reality. And I think the way to see this, I may have said this already, did I talk about it for a minute? If you want to know how to see this difference, Japan is a wonderful test case of this difference. Or at least it was when I was there 30 years ago. But I was there for a month last summer, and it still has a lot of this. There's all these gadgets, more people with more digital cameras and high-resolution television and every sort of thing you could imagine of the highest development of high tech, and people who are still living in a different understanding of being, and if they have one at all. But I think they don't have one unified understanding of being. They're really polytheists, and they have, in different situations, different understandings of what's important and what's real. And they do weird things, like all come out with their digital cameras to take pictures of the irises on the main day that the irises bloom, and they all descend on this town to take pictures of the irises. I mean, this is strange, and it's not technological. I don't know what it is. But what I want to say is that you can have all these gadgets without having an understanding that our whole job is to control and dominate ourselves and everything in the universe. They haven't got that at all. The most striking example I know is I went to visit some professor's family, And it was such a mixture of strange things. He's a modern professor, but his wife kneeled by the table and served us, and didn't eat with us. That was already, from our point of view, pretty strange. And the most strange to me was that the television set and the household gods were on the same shelf, and they took them equally seriously. That they really are believing polytheists. Anyway, I want you to see that you can separate technicity, which we have, from lots of technological gadgets, which we have and they have. And Heidegger's interested not in the gadgets. He has nothing against them. I mean, he'd be perfectly happy with them. He doesn't like gadgets very much, but if you do, that's all right with him. But what he thinks we have to get a free relation to is technicity. That is, we have to get in the right relation so that everything we do isn't controlled by a technological understanding of being, which I keep repeating, so far looks like attempts to dominate and control and stabilize and get a total picture of everything. You don't have to do it. Boy, the Japanese know how to do it. They've got no total picture of everything. They've got thousands of gods that they believe in. And he wants to say that, on 4, that the essence of technology, let's say technicity, is by no means anything technological. Thus we shall never experience our relation to the essence of technology so long as we merely conceive and push forward the technological, put up with it, or evade it. Everywhere we remain unfree and chained to technology, whether we passionately affirm it or deny it, that we are delivered over to it in the worst possible way when we regard it as something neutral and so forth. Now, all I want to say is, he wants to say we shouldn't sort of resist it in the sense of try to stop technology or get less of it, and we shouldn't further it. Where is it like push on with it or try to stop it like the work of the devil? Where does he say that? Near the beginning. I don't think I wrote down. Maybe I did. Let's see. No, but I would like to read it, mostly because people misunderstand him on this. Doesn't that sound familiar with you, those of you who started reading this? It's very near the beginning, I think. He wants to get us a free relation, and that means we won't be forcefully opposing it or forcefully promoting it. Well, I'll find it next time. I don't see it. You don't remember that? Nobody remember that? I swear that's in here. I didn't hallucinate that. But I don't know where it is. So let's not worry about it. It's certainly what he wants. But I'll go back to a new important thing to have in mind when you read this, which is that he's now got a new name for the understanding of being. And instead of talking about technology as an understanding of being, he's got a better name. That's such a sort of slogan that you hardly know what it means. I tried to make it meaningful last lecture. But he's now got this thing about mode of revealing. That's much nicer. That a mode of remember that the understanding of being lets things show up as whatever. So as creatures, or as welling up nature, or as subjects and objects. Insofar as the understanding of being lets things show up as something, he's now decided to name it the mode of revealing. So the mode of revealing for the Greeks is poiesis, and the mode of revealing for the Christians is everything shows up as creatures, and the mode of revealing for the moderns is everything shows up as objects, and you just have to watch for that now. Technology... Yes, it's the new word for style. The new word for style is mode of revealing. Because, see, that tells you instead of pay attention to the style, pay attention to what the style makes you pay attention to. Ooh, what a slogan. Okay, that's exactly what he wants you to do. So he says on the middle of 12, technology is no mere means, technology is a way of revealing. If we give heed to this, then another whole realm for the essence of technology will open up to us, the realm of revealing, that is, of truth. He redefines truth, but you don't have to worry about that. For him, truth is just revealing. So what we'll understand the way technology reveals whatever we deal with. Now, and so what mode of revealing is it? Well, he says that it's a completely new mode of revealing on page 5. That interests me because, in a way, I think there's twice. I mean, it's doubly new. Modern technology was a completely new way of revealing, namely subjects and objects. But postmodern technology is a new way of revealing that isn't modern technology. And I promised somebody I would say one thing about in the lecture. Came up, talked to me after the lecture about the place where it looks like he sort of stumbles onto something postmodern when he's talking, when he, in the Age of the World picture. I just mention it and we'll come back to it. When he's talking about how everything turns into ongoing activity on 125, and the modern research person is always on the move and constantly on the move, he says, the middle of the page and so forth. And then there's a note, I'll come back to it, where he says that busyness, everything becomes busyness. All that doesn't sound very much like subjects and objects. It sounds like he's got something else now. And he's sensitive to something else that's happening. That people are becoming adaptable and everything is up for grabs and changeable, and so you can redefine all the departments. We talked about that a little last time. Okay, enough of that, because I'm going to come back to that. But let's go on here. I only came to that because I don't know when he says technology is something altogether new, whether he really realizes, because that was 50 years ago. And he was sort of on the cusp of modern turning to postmodern. I don't know whether he really understands that there's two new things or one. But I'm going to try to read it to show you that in the Age of the World picture, it's about modernity, except for this one place where it sounds postmodern in terms of everything being up for grabs and flexible and changing. But that in the question concerning technology, he's mostly clear that what he's talking about is something else than that. And that's what we have to look at now. But that's the completely new. So exploitation, objectifying isn't what he really wants to talk about. It sounds like that's what he's talking about on 13 and 14. These distinctions aren't very sharp yet, but on 13, right after he's talked about technology as a way of revealing, he says, techne belongs. Now technology is not the same as techne on 13. Techne is the Greek word, and for the Greeks, techne was bringing forth, was poiesis. We talked about that. And that is, the sculptor brings the statue out of the stone, and the farmer helps the grain grow out of the ground and so forth. That's what techne was. But now what is technology? It's a different mode of revealing than techne. And that's what he's trying to get at. And I lost my place. Oh, here we are. So on 14 and 15, it isn't very clear yet. I want to get by the end of the hour to where it gets clear, so let me go on here. But he gets sort of in the right direction on 14 already. When, having said that poiesis is nurturing in effect, is bringing forth, he tries to say what it is about technology that isn't bringing forth. And he doesn't say dominating and objectifying. He says something else. The middle is very important here. But he says modern technology. He doesn't have a word postmodern. So when he says modern, it means whatever he makes it mean. And here modern sounds postmodern. So, and yet the revealing that holds sway throughout modern technology does not unfold into a bringing forth, that's sure, in the sense of poiesis. The revealing that rules in modern technology is a challenging, which puts to nature the unreasonable demand. That's the German is messed up there. It says, which calls nature to supply energy There's just nothing about unreasonable demand. Who's to say what's reasonable and unreasonable from where? So you just cross that out. So it's which calls nature to supply energy which can be extracted and stored as such, and so forth. Okay, and then he tries to explain what this new understanding is that he calls challenging forth, and he describes all sorts of interesting things which were not the sort of thing he was talking about in the Age of the World picture. And, for instance, at the top of 15, he talks about agribusiness, and that's a kind of challenging, very different than peasants nurturing. The work of peasants does not challenge the soil of the field. In the sowing of the grain, it places the seed in the keeping of the forces of growth and watches over its increase. That meanwhile, even the cultivation of the field has come under the grip of another kind of setting in order, which sets upon nature, sets upon it in the sense of challenging it. Agriculture is now the mechanized food industry. And so that an air is now set upon to yield nitrogen, the earth to yield ore to yield uranium, and so forth. On all of this turns out to be this, and now comes the new understanding, really. This setting upon, I'm just reading the next paragraph, the challenges for it, the energies of nature, is an expediting. And in two ways. Expediting, your ears should perk up if you heard. This has got to do with people like Taylor. My father, who was in the poultry business, was invited during the war to come to Washington as an expediter. You heard that expression? He was supposed to sort of make the poultry industry efficient, and he didn't do it. So I was never raised in Washington, but I got sensitive to this term, expediting. The energies in nature is an expediting in two ways. It expedites in that it unlocks and exposes. Yet that expediting is always itself directed from the beginning towards furthering something else, towards driving on to maximum yield at minimum expense. Now, why do we go aha at that point in this course? Well, that's Taylor's slogan. So the essence of this kind of technology that sets upon, which I think is postmodern, is Taylor's kind. And Taylor is very sensitive to this. So I found the quotes let me find out where we are. What did I do with it? I can find them again, but I had them here.
Are you saying that Taylor is responding?
Am I? Well, wow. That's a good question. I'm saying that insofar, I think he's like everybody else. He's sort of going across this gap. That aspect of Taylor, which thinks that the most important thing you can do is optimize things, that aspect of him is, I think, postmodern. What isn't postmodern in Taylor? It's that you can find the one right way and sort of stabilize that, I think, and put it in rules, and then everybody obeys those rules for the rest of eternity. When you know the right way to shovel the coal or the right way to move pig iron, you just know that. That doesn't sound flexible enough. That is, I guess I hadn't thought about it, but you could put it this way, that for Taylor, the optimal is something you can find out, and then it's fixed once and for all. This is what I was looking for. What he wants on page 10 is obtaining the maximum output for each man and each machine. In the middle of the page, and at the bottom, the importance of obtaining the maximum output, again, is and for each man. That's his thing, and that's, if you think there is just one maximum and you can just obtain it, then that's where Taylor got. And if you want to say, but getting the most out of your possibilities isn't just one thing, but you can get more and more possibilities and get more and more out of them, then you're beyond something Taylor thought. Now I'm really far from where I was, and I'm going to find where I am. So on 14 and 15, it's not just the kind of domination and control that we saw back on page 132, gaining mastery over the whole. I think something new has come in now, and that's this notion of efficiency, maximum yield at minimum expense. That's different than, can you feel the difference between that, getting sort of control of everything, dominating it as a whole? Doesn't say getting maximum yield at minimum expense. That just says getting control of everything and dominating it as a whole and getting it to serve your needs. But the idea that the whole point is to do it optimally and to be efficient when you do it, that's a new angle, I think. And Heidegger's onto it. And he stops right with, he hits it right there. Maximum yield at minimum expense, exactly the phrase that Taylor used. So Taylor was onto this at the turn of the century, and that's fine. I think that your question is important because I think it's puzzling how Taylor has sort of half of it. That is, he's got this optimizing story, but he's got it as if somehow once you got it, you never have to change anymore, where you just stick with it. And the idea that you get in the really postmodern is you can always optimize more. It's the difference between getting the total picture and totalizing, which you never arrive at. I think maybe that's what I was trying to get. What?
It seems complicated. It seems that whatever remains, the remainder of what the static picture leaves out requires to be continually be totalized and brought back into static picture. So it's always whatever remains outside of that always has to be reinterpreted back in.
For Taylor, anyway. Yeah. For Taylor.
So that would always be called a little flexibility. It would require, just like you think of it in labor terms, if Taylor is basically saying, well, we'll find you a position somewhere else, you're having this kind of remainder of labor that now has no place to be put within the workforce, then all of a sudden has to find yourself a new kind of location.
Well, Taylor claims that he will put these people all in a place where they will each have a job and do their optimal. But what I think that's true, but I don't think that's the important thing. I still think what I'm saying is the most important thing is, and maybe I'm just making this up, and it may not turn out to be right, that certainly Taylor wants maximum yield at minimum expense, and so does Heidegger, and Heidegger's describing this new phenomenon of what he calls challenging forth, and Taylor is still somehow more in the past. So unless anybody has a better idea, I think the question is whether you want to just find the optimal and do it, make the right machine tool, find the one best way and stick to it, or whether you're always trying to find better and better ways and new jobs and new tools. And I think that the challenging forth, I think agribusiness, for instance, doesn't think, here's a good test. I don't think the people in agribusiness think they've just got it now and they're optimizing the use of the Central Valley. There's always more fertilizers, better fertilizers, genetic engineering. You never get to the one right answer. And that's what Heidegger senses, I think, now. And that makes it particularly dangerous, that for Heidegger. Because this sense of always taking in more and turning more and more into what he calls standing reserve makes just the opposite of the stability that Taylor was trying to get. It makes the fact that we are always colonizing more and more into the efficiency realm. So on the picture of Central Valley must be just like that. The agribusiness people are constantly able to take over more and more and more and turn it into what Heidegger calls standing reserve. That German word, Bestand, which gets translated standing reserve, I would translate it resources. The reason it gets translated standing reserve is because that stand is standing. But if you want to just get a feel for what it is, it's resources in the sense that you talk about human resources. And what are the resources of the Central Valley? And have we really got the most out of our resources? That's what he's interested in. And that's on the top of 17. And this is where I want to stop, and we just got here. So let me read this. Everywhere, this is the modern, the postmodern, although he hasn't got a name for it. What kind of concealment is it, then, that is peculiar to that which comes to stand forth through the setting upon unconcealment? That is, this is the way how things look. the unconcealment that is peculiar to that which comes to stand forth through the setting upon the challenges. Everywhere, everything is ordered to stand by, to be immediately at hand, indeed to stand there just so it may be called upon for further ordering. See, that's the non-Taylor part. It's always going further. Whatever is ordered about in this way has its own standing. We call it standing reserve. So you call it resources. I call it resources. Whatever stands, I'm skipping to the bottom, by in the sense of standing reserve, no longer stands over against us as object. Wow. You see, he has talked himself out of the whole story of the Age of the World picture, where it was all a question of subjects and objects. And now it turns out there aren't any objects. Everything is there for constant improvement, enhancement, development. So he says the airliner that stands on the runway is surely an object. He's being ironic. Certainly, we can represent the machine so that it conceals its, but then it conceals itself as to what it and how it is. Revealed, it stands on the taxi strip only as standing reserve, insomuch as is ordered to ensure the possibility of transportation. It's part of the transportation system, and I'm sure he thinks that people are not autonomously, freely using the planes to satisfy their desires. The people are being produced by the, what do you call it, the something industry, the travel industry, to be the resources that fill the planes. And it's all just a bunch of, and that means we're being turned into resources too. He's very clear about that. That's why I talked about human resources. Everything is just being turned into what furthers the ordering and optimizing and expansion. That's very important of the system. And that's, I think, where I'm going to stop. But let me just make sure. Don't run away till I'm sure I know where I am. Okay. I say everything, including us, becomes resources. Did I say that? Well, with no more objects. I said that. And presumably no more subjects, no autonomous agents. I didn't say it that way, but that's what I think follows from the fact that everything is now part. The tourists are produced to fill the planes. I have a place where I think he's saying something like that. Oh yeah, he's talking in the middle of 18 about the supply, the talk about human resources, the supply of patients to fill a clinic, and so forth. That the guy walking in the fields is commanded by the profit-making of the lumber industry. See, everything's become part of the system, and we're just part of the system too. So it's important, you see it, I imagine, that just as there are no more objects, everything is in a system to get the most out of it at the optimal and keep getting it more and more optimized. There are no more subjects in control of it, dominating it, and dominating themselves. That's not what there is anymore. We are also resources, which the whole system is getting the most out of. Now, we don't know whether that's bad or not. Maybe it's good that everybody's getting the most out of everything and everybody's getting the most out of their own. The system is optimizing us too. But maybe it isn't. So let me just stop at this. So there's no fixed end. There's just optimizing. That's what he thinks. And that's what Taylor thinks. I see that I have a reference in Taylor. What do I want to read here? That's again about maximum efficiencies. Okay, so we've gotten to the point then where there's something entirely new. Second time. Now, subjects and objects were entirely new. Now Heidegger sees, well, they're not really objects. Things are there to be further and further optimized and integrated into a system. And they're not really subjects. We're just integrated into the system too to get the most out of our possibilities and to make the system work. That's it. Now, the next time I'll talk about and what's wrong with all that. You might think that's terrific. We finally arrived at a way where everybody's going to live happily ever after. Okay.